Because we all know what happens if we don't win this race. It's written into the fabric of every community in this nation. The skills jobs that disappear, the communities that lost their place in the world. Not just the security and dignity of their work, not just their pride and purpose, their identity. That's the price of inaction when the winds of change blow this hard. The price of losing the race for new industries. And look, this is political as well. If we don't show a path to the future, others will fill that void. In fact, they already are. A dangerous right-wing politics, even here in Scotland, that will say they are the ones who can tilt politics towards the interests of working people, even as their proposals do precisely the opposite. A politics which feeds off the failure of the free market, the failure of public services to reform, and above all, the failure to control borders properly. We have to be ready for this test conference, ready to point out that beneath their bluster, the alternative they offer is alien to working people. You want to know what Farage and Reform are doing on their rare visits to Parliament? They're voting against our Employment Rights Bill. They talk the language of workers' rights online and on the doorstep, but they voted against banning fire and rehire. They voted against scrapping exploitative zero-hour contracts. They voted against sick leave and maternity pay. And what about the NHS? They want to charge people to use our NHS. They claim to be the party of patriotism, but they're fawning over Putin. No, they are not the answer for working people in Britain. And they are not the answer for Scotland. And contrast that with what you've seen from Anas and Jackie this weekend. What you've seen from the difference we're making in Westminster. And it's day and night. Only Labour can make the difference for working people. Only Labour will put more money in your pocket. Only Labour will fix our broken economy. Only Labour will secure our border. Only Labour can save our NHS, put police back on your streets, give our children the opportunities they deserve. Only Labour can deliver change for Scotland.
In his speech, Keir Starmer strongly criticises Nigel Farage and the political movement associated with him, accusing them of presenting harmful solutions for working people in Britain. Starmer points out the stark contrast between Farage's rhetoric and the reality of his actions. While Farage and his supporters claim to champion the interests of the working class, Starmer highlights their consistent voting record against crucial Labour protections. These include opposing the banning of fire and rehire practices, rejecting the abolition of exploitative zero-hour contracts, and voting against measures for sick leave and maternity pay. Starmer argues that their actions undermine the very rights and well-being of the working class, despite their claims to support them. Starmer also criticizes Farage's movement for backing harmful economic policies and their stance on public services, especially the NHS. He accuses Farage's side of seeking to charge people for NHS services in stark contrast to the Labour Party's commitment to safeguarding public services. In a particularly biting remark, Starmer notes that although Farage and his followers present themselves as true patriots, they are in reality aligning with figures like Putin, who many view as opposed to British interests. Moreover, Starmer frames his critique within a larger political context, warning that the absence of progressive action on issues like industry and the economy is being filled by dangerous right-wing politics. He asserts that if the Labour Party does not take charge in shaping the future, figures like Farage will exploit the situation for their own gain, promoting solutions that threaten the country's social fabric. Ultimately, Starmer's attack on Farage goes beyond personal criticism. It serves as a condemnation of the ideological and practical consequences of right-wing populism. He contrasts this with Labour's vision for the future, stating that only Labour can provide the leadership necessary to protect working people, revive the economy, secure public services, and restore national pride, without resorting to the divisive and regressive politics of the right.
I just think there's a key point here, right? Actually, if you go right back to the Second World War, defence spending has been broadly decreasing ever since, obviously more sharply since the Cold War. And in that time, welfare spending has gone up. In many ways, we spent the peace dividend on welfare. We now have a situation where there's been this very sharp increase in people on disability benefit, for anxiety or whatever, many people of working age. And I'm afraid that can't go on as a country. We're going to have to be more resilient. So I think looking at welfare is not just about the savings, it's about our country getting onto a pro-growth footing.
But that is where you would look then. Disability benefits would be somewhere you'd be willing to pull back money to spend on defence instead.
So our Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride, as you know, was previously the DWP Secretary in charge of benefits. He set out a very clear plan, and we're not sure yet whether the government are going to follow that.
But that plan would not be enough cash in order to pay for the big extra lump of money that you're suggesting would be needed for defence. So just to be really clear, you're suggesting that you'd be willing to take a bigger axe to the welfare budget for people with mental health issues. You mentioned anxiety there, who might be claiming disability benefits in order to get money for defence. That's where you would
Just to be clear, Laura, I'm not saying the exact policy here and now, right? We will write our manifesto.
I'm giving a sense
of the fact that I think as a country, facing the threats that we do, we have got to be more resilient, and we've got to wise up to the fact that we cannot have a welfare budget that keeps ballooning whilst needing to increase spending on defence. It's quite clear, and I know that's a difficult thing to talk about, but we're going to have to get real about this.
What do you think, Keir Starmer?
In this statement, James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, addresses the issue of balancing welfare spending with defence expenditure. He begins by highlighting a long-term trend in government spending, noting that defence spending has been decreasing since World War II, with a sharper decline since the Cold War. Meanwhile, welfare spending has been rising, with a particularly notable increase in disability benefits, especially for individuals claiming benefits due to mental health issues such as anxiety. Cartledge suggests that this increase in welfare spending cannot continue unchecked, as it may undermine the country's ability to respond to growing defence needs. Cartledge argues that the country must become more resilient and shift its focus towards a pro-growth economic strategy, which would include re-evaluating welfare spending. He emphasises that while welfare is important, it needs to be balanced with the demands of national security. The conversation turns toward disability benefits, where Cartledge suggests that pulling back on certain welfare programs, particularly for those with mental health conditions, might be necessary to free up funds for defence spending. He points out that the current government plan, which was put forward by the previous Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, WP, does not provide enough funding to meet the proposed increases in defence spending. Cartledge clarifies that, while he is not advocating for a specific policy at this moment, he believes that welfare spending, especially on mental health-related disability benefits, could be a source of savings to support defence needs. He acknowledges that this is a difficult issue to discuss, but stresses the importance of facing up to the reality that the welfare budget cannot continue to grow without restraint, especially when defence spending also needs to be increased in response to national security threats.